Silence is power. While the world screams louder every day about personal growth, the strongest people do something radical. They move in silence. Have you noticed? The ones who truly hold power, they don't chase attention. They don't announce every move. In fact, they almost vanish from the noise around them, not because they're hiding, but because they've mastered something most people never will. The ability to detach from the need to be seen. No likes, no applause, no performance, just quiet control. And that's what makes them dangerous. It's their absence that makes others feel their presence. What do you call someone like that? Someone disciplined, minimal, sharp, and impossible to shake. You call them a modern Stoic monk, because once you've mastered your inner world, you no longer need to chase the outer one. The power of inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote his journals for one reason only: not to impress, not to publish, but to confront himself. Every line was a mirror, brutal self-honesty, no audience, no applause. Epictetus was born into chains, crippled, unseen. But mentally, he was untouchable, because freedom doesn't start when the world gives you permission. It starts when you no longer need the world's approval. These men weren't chasing fame. They were chasing something rarer than status, inner freedom. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt exhausted from constantly trying to be someone, to prove your worth in a world that's always watching, scrolling, judging? Here's the truth. You don't have to play that game. You don't have to scream louder just to be heard. You can step back and still win. This isn't about trendy minimalism. It's not about hiding from life. It's about mastering it through stillness, through structure, through strategic detachment. Because when you stop chasing validation, you reclaim the one thing most people lose the moment they wake up: sovereignty over your own mind. And that's what this video is about. Not motivation, not hustle, not hype, but how to live like a modern Stoic monk. Calm, clear, focused, invisible to noise, but impossible to ignore. 1. Strategic minimalism. Cut to control, not to suffer. Most people get minimalism wrong. They think it's about owning nothing, living small, depriving yourself. But for a modern Stoic monk, minimalism isn't about less. It's about control. Let me show you what that looks like. Seneca, one of the richest men in ancient Rome, had gold, estates, political power, but once a month he chose to sleep on the floor, to wear rough clothes, to eat like a beggar. Why? Because he didn't want comfort to become dependency. He didn't want wealth to become a leash. He wanted proof that if it all disappeared tomorrow, he would still be unshaken. That's not deprivation, that's domination. The Stoic version of minimalism is this: cut not to suffer, but to sharpen. Remove not to look spiritual, but to reclaim power. Now bring that to your life. You don't need to throw away everything you own, but you do need to ask yourself one question: what owns me? Do you reach for your phone before your own thoughts? Do you buy things to feel something? Do you keep people in your life just to avoid silence? That's where strategic minimalism begins. Try this. Declutter your space. Your environment is a reflection of your mind. Digital detox. 24 hours off social media every week. Reset your nervous system. Cut toxic ties. Not all company is connection. Some people are just noise with a face. And here's the Stoic truth. The more you remove, the more power you reclaim. The less you depend on, the less they can use against you. You don't need more. You need less that is yours, and more that is real. Because minimalism isn't about having nothing, it's about needing nothing, except your own will. Now that the clutter's gone, you've made space. But space means nothing if you don't fill it with something solid. And for a Stoic monk, that something is ruthless discipline. Let's move into strategy number 2. 2. Discipline like a warrior. No deals with weakness. Once you've stripped away the noise, the next question is, what do you build in its place? For a Stoic monk, the answer is always the same: discipline, and not the soft, motivational kind. I'm talking about cold, unflinching self-mastery. Let's go back to Epictetus. Born into slavery, physically crippled, and entirely powerless by the world's standards. But every day, through thought, repetition, and relentless inner work, he became mentally indestructible. He had no control over his body, no control over his status, but he owned his reactions. He owned his mindset. He owned his principles. And that made him freer than the emperors he would one day teach. Because true freedom isn't doing whatever you feel. It's doing what's right, especially when you don't feel like it. Here's the modern trap. We confuse comfort with happiness. We think discipline is punishment. We avoid routine because we're too busy. But in truth, we're just avoiding ourselves. If you want to live like a modern Stoic monk, discipline must become your identity. Here's where to start: the Stoic morning routine. Before the world touches your mind, center it. 5 minutes of silence. Journaling. What do I control today? What values will I live by? And one question to set your focus: what would my highest self do today? No excuses, no distractions. You don't scroll when you should be training. You don't overthink when action is required. You move. Do what needs to be done. Period. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't ask for motivation. You act, because that's who you are. Every time you obey a fleeting emotion, you weaken the warrior. Every time you stay firm in your values, you sharpen the blade. And the more consistent you become, the more dangerous your presence feels. Because while others are ruled by urges, you operate by code. Discipline isn't about restriction. It's about eliminating weakness before it becomes habit. So now we've built a strong foundation: minimalism and discipline. But there's a third trait of the modern Stoic monk that turns all of this into unshakable power. Let's talk about something even rarer than motivation: independent thinking. 3. Independent thinking. Escape the crowd that's asleep. Let's get real for a second. We live in a world that doesn't want you to think. It wants you to scroll, to react, to consume, and above all, to conform. But the modern Stoic monk, he doesn't just avoid the noise. He thinks for himself. He questions the script. Marcus Aurelius ruled over one of the largest empires in history, yet in his meditations he constantly reminded himself, don't let the opinions of others become your thoughts. Don't let their noise drown out your reason. Even as an emperor, he knew the greatest threat wasn't war or rebellion, it was losing himself in the crowd. Now let's fast forward 2,000 years. Most people today don't even realize they've outsourced their mind. They let TikTok trends shape their values. They let comment sections define their confidence. They let algorithm-driven chaos tell them who they should be. That's not freedom. That's mental slavery dressed up as entertainment. Independent thinking doesn't mean being contrarian. It means you've done the work to know why you believe what you believe. Here's how a modern Stoic monk trains that skill. Solitude thinking. 15 minutes a day. No music, no phone, no podcast. Just you, your thoughts, and a notebook. Ask, what do I believe right now that I didn't question? You'll be shocked by how much of your mind isn't yours. Input audit. What are you feeding your brain daily? Replace noise with signal. Trade opinions for ancient wisdom. You don't need more information. You need better filters. Mental fasting. 1 day a week, No news, no opinions, no social input. Let your mind digest. Let your own voice grow louder than the world's echo chamber. Because in a world hypnotized by popularity, a clear, independent thinker becomes a force of nature. When you no longer need the crowd to validate you, the crowd starts to follow you. But clarity of thought means nothing if you can't protect your mind from chaos. That brings us to the next pillar of the Stoic monk's life, the power of silence. Let's talk about mastering the art of cutting noise. 4. Silence as fortress. Cut the noise, guard the mind. In a world that constantly demands your attention, silence becomes rebellion. Noise is no longer just background. It's a weapon. Notifications, endless content, opinions you didn't ask for. Every sound, every scroll, every buzz steals from your peace. But the modern Stoic monk, he knows that silence is more than peace. It's protection. It's strategy. Think about it. We live in a time where people can't even sit still without a screen, where silence makes people uncomfortable, where boredom is instantly filled, because facing your own thoughts feels like a threat. That's why the Stoic monk doesn't just avoid noise. He actively cuts it, because the mind can't be sharp if it's always being distracted. Let me give you something practical. Silent hour, daily. 1 hour, no input, no background noise, no multitasking, not even music, just presence. Use it to think, to breathe, to recalibrate. At first it'll feel strange, then it'll feel necessary. Soon it'll feel like power. Digital Sabbath, weekly. 1 full day with zero social media, zero content consumption. Just you, a notebook, maybe nature, maybe reflection. No scrolling, no stimulation. You'll be amazed at how much clarity your brain regains in 24 hours. The not now rule. When something grabs your attention, ask, does this deserve my mind right now? If not, let it go. Protect your mental energy like it's your most valuable currency, because it is. Silence isn't just a lack of noise, it's a sharpening of focus. It's where your most strategic thoughts are born. It's where you stop reacting and start responding with intention. The world trains you to fear silence, so you never hear yourself think. But the Stoic monk? He makes silence his fortress, his temple, his training ground. But once you've found stillness, once you've separated your mind from the noise, there's one more enemy left, the ego. And for a Stoic monk, mastering the ego is not optional, it's survival. Let's move into the next strategy, eliminating ego to access real clarity. 5. Ego elimination. Rise above the need to be seen. Now that the noise is gone, what's left? Your thoughts, your values, and, if you're honest, your ego. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Even after we remove distractions, many of us still perform. We speak to impress. We share to be praised. We work not for excellence, but for applause. And that's where the Stoic monk draws a hard line. Let's go back to Marcus Aurelius. He was emperor of the Roman Empire. He could have written anything, commanded anyone. But instead, he wrote in private, "You are just a soul carrying a corpse." Brutal, grounding, humble. He reminded himself daily that his status, his achievements, his power were illusions. He was not above anyone. He was not owed anything. And he had nothing to prove. This is the true battle of the Stoic monk, to kill the ego before the ego kills the mission, because ego is deceptive. It tells you to talk more than you listen, to argue when silence would show more strength, to chase attention instead of truth. But ego can't survive in solitude. It feeds on performance, on recognition, on noise. So here's how a Stoic monk breaks free. Evening ego check, nightly. Ask yourself before bed, where did I act today just to be seen? Write it down. Study the pattern. Cut it tomorrow. Practice invisibility. Let others get the credit sometimes. Speak less in group settings. Don't correct every misconception about you. Let your work, presence, and consistency speak louder than your mouth ever could. Detach from identity labels. You are not your job title. You are not your follower count. You are not what others project onto you. You are the values you live by when no one is watching. A Stoic monk doesn't need to be admired. He needs to be free. Free from proving, free from performing, free from the exhausting need to always be someone. Now that ego is no longer in control, there's one final strategy that seals this entire way of life. It's what makes the Stoic monk almost mythical in the eyes of others. The power of disappearing on purpose. Let's talk about strategic absence. 6. Strategic disappearance. Let your absence speak louder than your presence. You've done the work. You've stripped down the noise, built discipline, strengthened your mind, killed the ego. Now it's time for your final move. Disappear strategically. Because in a world that demands constant visibility, vanishing is power. Seneca once said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And Marcus Aurelius, he mastered the art of being present only when it mattered. Never overexposed, never predictable, always intentional. And that's the key. The Stoic monk isn't absent because he's hiding. He's absent because he's focused. He understands one thing most people never will. Scarcity builds value, silence builds mystique, and absence creates respect. Let me put it plainly. The more often people see you, the less they feel you. If you're always available, always reacting, always explaining, you become common, forgettable. But when you disappear with purpose, when you pull back to sharpen, to build, to observe, you return as a different force. Here's how to apply this power. Strategic withdrawal, weekly, one day, no messages, no social media, no updates. Not because you're avoiding, because you're refining. Let people wonder. Let your silence echo louder than your presence. Controlled visibility. Stop showing up everywhere. Be intentional. Speak only when your words carry weight. Act only when your presence shifts the room. Disappear to reinvent. If the world expects you to show up a certain way, break the pattern. Work in the shadows. Come back unrecognizable, stronger, sharper, colder, because people respect what they can't access. They value what's earned, not what's constantly offered. And that's the paradox of power. When you're always there, you become invisible. But when you master the art of absence, you become unforgettable. Now that you've learned all 6 strategies, you're not just living less. You're living higher. You've built something most people never will. An inner fortress that doesn't just protect your peace. It radiates unshakable power. Let's bring it all together in the final segment. The unshakable force within. Let's be clear. This is not about being passive. This is not about disappearing into some mountain cave. This is about building a life of such deep internal control that no one and nothing can shake it. Because when you live like a modern Stoic monk, you stop chasing approval. You stop reacting to chaos. You stop needing the world to validate your worth. You become self-directed, self-disciplined, self-defined. Let's break it down one last time. You cut the excess, so nothing owns you. You build ruthless discipline, so emotion doesn't run your life. You think for yourself, even when everyone else is asleep. You guard your mind as the fortress it was meant to be. You shatter the ego because performance is weakness. And finally, you disappear with strategy, because real power doesn't beg to be seen. You don't need to speak loudly to command attention. You don't need followers to lead. You don't need to prove anything when you've already mastered yourself. This is what it means to live like a Stoic monk in the modern world. Not loud, not flashy, but calm, cold, focused, untouchable. If this hits something real inside you, if you're tired of the noise, the pressure, the mental exhaustion of always having to be someone, then you're ready for the next step. Watch the next video. The power you can't see, but everyone feels. It'll teach you how to project quiet authority without saying a word, because sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who simply doesn't need the room at all. Grab their soul.